I think it was helpful in that through a different series of events, like I basically burnt the boats. Like this had to work.
Yeah.
This had to work. There was no option for
Uh,
it not to work. And so that was it. I don't necessarily suggest that to everybody,
yeah.
but that was the path that worked for us. Was like, this just has to work. We have to figure it out. And just going from there and then testing, learning and going and figuring out what works.
Welcome to the Counterweight podcast. I am Doug Rogers, your host, and I'm excited to share these stories of vision, passion, and growth leadership in digital health. I am focused on speaking to and learning from founders, growth, and operational leaders across the healthcare space about their journeys and lessons learned. We believe that a majority of people join healthcare companies, technology companies, providers, healthcare systems, because they believe in the mission of improving lives of those around them. We will discuss with our guests their why for digital health. We will learn about success and challenges and what they learned from these events for themselves and for their teams. We will also discuss what tips and tricks these leaders use to help keep them positioned for success, as well as how they balance the tension between mission and margin. Join us each week for a new episode with our guests. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and LinkedIn under the name The Counterweight. Subscribe, like, follow, and give us feedback as we go along. Now on to our show. Hello and welcome. My name is Doug Rogers, and I'm the founder and host of the Counterweight podcast. And we are excited to welcome Steven Coen of SaRA Health, CEO and founder of SaRA Health, to the pod today. Steven, it's great to see you. Now, Steven, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about who you are in SaRA Health, and then we're going to dive into what's going to be a fantastic conversation.
Absolutely. Well, Doug, I want to say thank you so much for having me on. And for those listening, I hope that can give you some value in dedicating your finite resource of time to listening today. So like Doug said, my name is Steven Coen. And the reason why we started SaRA Health was I'm a frustrated patient. So I've had labrum surgery, ACL meniscus surgery. I compete nationally as an Olympic weightlifter. Physical therapy has been a part of my life since I was like 14.
Now, wait. I'm just going to pause you for a moment. I think I knew this, but it's still worth saying. You compete as an Olympic weightlifter. So that's right, right? Okay.
That is right.
All right.
That is right. To make sure there's no misunderstanding, Olympic weightlifting is snatch and clean and jerk. I am not going to LA 2028.
Okay.
As anything but a fan. Which I do hope to do this year. We actually sponsored one of the 2024 weightlifters from Team USA. She got 5th in the women's heavyweight division. So stinking strong. I like lifting with her because it's a lot of fun, but also she lifts a lot more than I do. So
well, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that you both lift a lot more than I do. And for our audience, I don't know that you can tell in this 2D format, but if you were to put Steven and I side by side, I could hide in his shadow. That's just that's a frame of reference. I don't know what that says about me, but so Steven, I tell us about SaRA Health. But what was the idea because you were doing this type of weightlifting or physical exercise, or what? As you tell us about it, where did you come up with the idea for SaRA Health?
It was really my experience as a patient in physical therapy.
Okay.
And so what I found was I was a really good patient, highly adherent, and still it felt like the care started and stopped in the clinic.
Oh.
And I found that really frustrating. I was like, and in particular, I think there's one question that really encapsulates the issue, which is the question that probably everyone can resonate with, that their doctor asks them, how's it been going since we last saw each other? It's like, this is knowable, right? And loggable. Also, that's a really terrible question because now I'm racing to be able to come up with data. White coat syndrome hits, right? All of that happens and you're just trying to blurt out an answer. And then that provider, that's all the data they have to use, they have available to them to be able to treat you, right? Like it just doesn't make any sense. And so that's why we started SaRA Health, was to give patients a way to be able to engage with their clinical team and be prompted to record different data points in between visits. So that's where it all started back in 2018.
Oh, wow. So 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Time flies.
It it does, right? It's the best way to be an overnight success, right? Is feel like
That's right. That's right.
And so that's where it started, was as my frustration as a patient, and that definitely was a lot of fueled the passion. But now my identity is much more as a pissed off grandson. And
Oh,
so my grandfather, who had been battling Parkinson's for about a decade, was hospitalized for a blockage.
okay.
Over the 30 days, he lost 12 pounds of lean muscle mass and ended up in a wheelchair because he didn't get a single day of PT or OT.
Really?
And one call, one text, one anything would have dramatically altered the course of his life. And then we expand that out broadly, the cost of his care. And then you expand that out one more, and you look at what Health Affairs says is that that lack of care coordination that my grandpa Morris experienced causes 20,000 excess deaths a year and costs the U.S. health system about $150 billion. So it's not just him, but that's what we're solving for, is making sure patients don't fall through the cracks at the worst case scenario. And at every other level, it's giving patients agency and an ability to communicate with their providers in between visits in a way that is simple for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key. Is there's tons of patient facing apps and all sorts of services out there, but we realize that to do it right, you have to solve for all four stakeholders. You have to solve for the patient,
Okay.
you have to solve for the provider, so it
Yeah.
has to be simple, has to fit into the workflow. You have to solve for the practice, and that they have to be able to make money on it. And you have to solve for the payer, right? And that can be through their CPT code structure, or being able to show value back to the payer in such a way that they're like, of course we're going to keep funding this. This is great. And we have good data to be able to show how it works for all four parties. And that's where we fit in the middle of, is making it better for patients, providers, practices, and payers, to where everyone can win in a simple way.
So first of all, I mean, what an incredible, powerful, unfortunate, but powerful story in terms of the experience that your own family member, your grandfather had. I want to tease a couple of things out there for a moment. So what I heard you say is he had a healthcare experience, and there was care that would have been would be recommended, would be a best care plan, if you will, but it was a breakdown in communication. It was probably a breakdown in communication between the doctor and physical therapy, two different groups, and ultimately that had a very demonstrable impact on health and wellness for your grandfather. But that's what SaRA Health is solving. You're making those problems go away for the healthcare system.
That's
Wow.
our goal. That's what we wake up every day
Woo.
trying to do and be better at. And the way that we accomplish that is through our software platform. We integrate into about 15 different EMRs, and the patient experience is purely SMS text messages.
Okay.
And so our system is using AI and a bunch of data that we can collect, and then providers can give us, to be able to ask a simple question to our patients each and every day based on who the patient is, what they're being treated for, where they're at in the recovery journey, who they're being treated by, and any other data that we can get our hands on, to be able to give something to the patient that's a question that is so close to what their provider would ask if they had 100 hours in the day, that they respond at about a 40 to 50% daily rate, which people keep telling me is like ridiculous in the best way. And then we're helping the providers triage so they know what patients is pulling them for more care. And then to make it all work financially, we're tracking it all and then giving the documentation and alerts to be able to bill for the CPT codes that we facilitate. So the practice is able to then invest more. And it creates this beautiful flywheel when done correctly, where, SaRA gets installed,
Yeah.
patient gets message, patient replies, provider uses that data in some way, shape, or form, patient sees value from the engagement, practice gets paid more. Then now they want to invest more resources in, right, and then just
It's a virtuous cycle.
growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, that is just a really, really awesome thing when done well. And you talked about earlier, so as you were describing that, I was envisioning these four cornerstones that you mentioned. And I think, to your point, it's certainly a virtuous cycle, but if any one of those cornerstones are out of whack, the house kind of topples over. It's not on a solid foundation. So today, SaRA Health, you're predominantly focused on the physical therapy market and practice. Is that correct?
Broadly musculoskeletal
Okay,
providers. So
gotcha.
physical therapy, occupational
Yeah.
therapy, speech, growing and pain management, and orthopedics as well. So
Wow.
if you treat musculoskeletal pain or disorders, that's our focus.
And one of the biggest intersections, as I understand it, especially for adults, the musculoskeletal, between occupational health and just between general life, right? These are one of the common friction or interaction points that we have with the healthcare system. So you're seeing a predominant, like a preponderance of patients, and in terms of the platform and the interactions that you're connecting.
There's the last estimate I saw was 75 million Americans get care from a musculoskeletal provider in a given year.
Wow. So, and just for, to your point, 75 million. So, nearly 1 out of 4 Americans, 1 out of 4 people in this country are getting care. And I would imagine probably 9 out of 10 are experiencing the pain points that you articulated, maybe 8 out of 10, because those 2 out of 10 are actually receiving a benefit from SaRA Health, and that's going to grow. But those other 80% have not had the benefit as of yet, right? They've got the fracture, the disconnected communication, et cetera, that they probably experience, that they have to navigate themselves.
That is our belief.
So what a compelling both problem statement and solution, focused on the patient engagement, patient navigation, more connectivity, if you will, to the practice, both in terms of that relationship, but then also the financial side. You mentioned your own personal experience going through surgery, being a PT patient, obviously what happened to your grandfather. But I imagine you probably didn't wake up one day there in Brookside, which, by the way, Brookside's lovely. It's a hotbed of innovation. But you probably didn't wake up one day and say, "Hey, I'm going to start SaRA Health." What was the origin story? Like, where did this kernel of the idea come from? And I don't think it was here in Kansas City. I think you were out. You were gestating ideas at someplace else.
I was. So, I started my career at Deloitte Consulting, and worked a lot on actually negotiating software contracts during mergers and acquisitions and divestitures, which gave me a very deep knowledge in how software businesses price and deliver value and do all that. And I started my first tech company in undergrad. As part of Deloitte Consulting's program, it's not even this way anymore, but it was up or out, right? So you either go get an MBA or you leave. And I said, well, MBA sounds pretty good. I think I'll go do that, and I'll try to start another company when I'm there. And I had done nothing in healthcare. I had sworn it off. I was like, this thing's too hard. I don't understand why anyone does this. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. But that all changed at the tiny little dinner table that my wife and I had in our apartment in Brentwood, right near the UCLA campus.
So out in California, you were out on the West Coast. Yeah. Okay.
Like 6 weeks into a full-time MBA program, which was the ideal time to have this, call it this, this light bulb moment. So she's type 1 diabetic and started wearing a continuous glucose monitor. And I saw how that allowed her to manage her disease instead of being managed by it. And that was my light bulb moment of, oh, this is why people do healthcare. I'm in. Like, I'm a healthcare guy. And so I'm in LA. I'm 6 weeks into a full-time MBA program. And the UCLA system, I could take classes anywhere I wanted to. And so I started going to the School of Public Policy, School of Public Health, into like the engineering masters and doctoral programs, like anywhere I could, the tech transfer group within their healthcare, anything I could do, I was doing as much as I could possibly learn. And then we took a class. I say we because my CTO, we met there. We took a class called MedTech Innovation. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant class in that they take MBAs, computer science, MDs, or other allied health professional schools, and then broadly School of Engineering, and then the School of Design, and they just bring everyone together and just let innovation flow.
Wow! What an experience!
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. That's where I met my CTO, and we started working on SaRA. I guess technically, we started working on SaRA in like December of 2016.
Oh wow! Okay.
It started to ferment, and we built it up over the course of my next, year and a half remaining in the MBA program. Launched out in 2018 when we graduated, and it's not been a smooth ride, as I will readily admit to anyone. It hasn't been a smooth ride, but we were in the right place in the right time, doing the right things, by actually being outside fee for service from 18 to 22. Because when these remote therapeutic monitoring CPT codes came out in 2022, we were already getting paid based on our engagement levels. So we were incentivized based on the level of engagement, which the higher the engagement for these remote therapeutic monitoring codes, the better that the practices get paid, and especially higher margins. So when it came out, we're like,
this is
where
great.
y'all been?
That's right.
Let's go.
So first of all, proverbial kitchen table, and by proverbial, actual kitchen table. You're sitting at the kitchen table. You're thinking through ideas. You have a lived experience, both in terms of being a patient, but you also have a lived experience. I don't think we should gloss over this. You started a business in your undergrad, and I think I remember. This really stuck out to me, Steven. When you were telling me the story, you told me, "Hey, here's what I was doing. It was getting some traction, and I tried to go raise funding, and keep me straight here. And I started walking down to the banks, and I couldn't get a loan. And had I known that you should go this route, maybe I would have gone a different path." I mean,
You remembered it accurately, very, very accurately. So we more like the short of it is we merged what is now like Course Hero or Chegg, along with a specified Craigslist just for the campus, as well as teacher recommendations, like Rate My Professor, all into one platform. And I think by the time we left, we had over 1 million page views.
Wow.
And I was told that the only way to raise capital for something like that is to go to a bank. And that is laughable advice, but I went and tried and got laughed out. Similarly got laughed out of I think it was 6, 7 banks. And then I just thought, like, hey, I don't know how to run a business. I'm bad at this. So I better go to Deloitte Consulting and learn a heck of a lot on how businesses run, which, thank goodness, like, it all led me there. And even talking about how important it is to have people believe in you. One of my classmates was our first check-in. So he was a section mate of mine, which means we spent a lot of time together over the course of those 2 years. And his company he co-founded in his undergrad exited to Unilever during program.
Wow.
And he's like, I'm going to start angel investing, and I want you to be one of my first checks. And I remember being like, are you sure? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I'm the person to have a unicorn. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't start successful software companies. And he's like, no, I believe in you. And if you just say you'll start it, I'll write the check today. And someone with that level of success making that bet on me changed my life forever. Because if he wouldn't have done that, I think there's a greater than 0% chance, maybe even a greater than 30% chance that it would just stay a class project and wouldn't have helped anyone.
Wow. Talk about sliding doors, if you will. I mean, between that relationship, but then also, had you had different advice and gone down a route of, instead of knocking on the doors of these banks, SaRA Health may not have been a thing, right? You may have been chasing a completely different sector. Just fast forward a little bit, when you did start SaRA Health, what did that experience of knocking on doors, going to 7 different banks, and as you said, being laughed out, if you will, I'm sure they weren't heckling you as you were walking out of the bank, but right. I mean, that's still, the first time's one thing, the second time's a different thing. The 7th time, right, it kind of gets into your psyche. But did that fuel your fire when you then started the next thing? And we're thinking about how hard it could be and how you kind of have grit to manage through that?
Yeah, I think it did. It showed me how important it is to surround yourself with people who have been there and done
Yeah.
it, right? So now having, Brandon, our first check-in, having him, we also got into Techstars Kansas City in the 2018 cohort. And I knew that stacking the deck in my favor was going to be incredibly important, and it has been over the course of the last, 7 years of the business. And we've continued to play on that same theme, where now we have 8 of our customers are also investors.
Oh, wow.
And then beyond that, we have one of the Our chief outcomes officer, who is also an investor in the company, she started her own PT practice, sold it, then opened up 100 locations and managed those before that got bought again. We also have the co-founder of ATI Physical Therapy, which was the first PT IPO on the cap table. He's one of our, he might actually be the largest angel investor in the company. And having those folks be able to guide us, both from the customer and the other clinical leaders that we now have, very much invested, like both figuratively and literally invested in our success, has been extremely helpful, and it's an unfair advantage, I think.
Well, I'm not going to give you that's an unfair advantage, but it's a great advantage to your point. And I just would say to our audience, I mean, I'm sure people hear this all the time, but as I listen to you, Steven, you've had some formative experiences, both in terms of ultimately what drove you to build something like SaRA Health, but starting something, building it, but then ultimately not being able to gestate it because you hit some funding roadblocks, et cetera, then going to Deloitte, going to business school. And, for our audience, I think my takeaway is there's a lot of no's on the pathway to success. And we're going to talk here in a moment about 2018 to 2022, because it wasn't all rosy and champagne dinners and, hey, things are going great, overnight success in those years. But there's a lot of no's on the pathway to success. And there's a lot of having to pull yourself up and say, hey, this is worth it. And probably the most important thing, at least for me, is it's not so much the failures themselves, but I hear you describing how you learned from those failures, what to do differently, how to stack the deck in your favor, the mentors to go find and bring into the conversation. Just a huge takeaway, if you will. So I want to go back. You graduate from with your MBA. UCLA is a great school, but glad you came back to Kansas City. Thank you for that. And you have this idea. You started SaRA Health, and it's 2018. You start building a business, and I know we'll talk about the advent of these CMS codes, but really the nature, if I recall correctly, of SaRA Health is you were focused on patient engagement, and you're trying to tell a value proposition story that was not necessarily anchored around government CPT codes that they could get reimbursed for. What were those early days like?
Really, really rough. Like they kind of sucked.
Yeah.
If we're being honest, but in all honesty, like, we didn't raise much money. We raised less than $250,000. So what that meant is my CTO had to, and I pretty quickly stopped taking a salary. And we ran up, at least personally, ran up into the healthy 5 digits of credit card debt.
Wow.
to be able to keep the dream alive. And like, that's real. Like, I think I wish someone would have told me that. Like, that absolutely can happen, but you could also come back from it.
Yes.
And so I think to your earlier question about learning, a common phrase that we use is it's just data, right? Customer signs a contract, that's just data. Someone, operates in an unethical way, that's just data. It's all data that you can then use to make an informed decision moving forward. So it's all data. And it's funny, our chief outcomes officer, Amanda, was at that point at Results Physiotherapy, got connected with her, and she's like, look, I'm going to pay for you twice. Once when my patient doesn't come back in and my visits per case goes down, which is our key metric. And the next time when you send me my monthly bill. So, like, I can't make this make sense until you can put it in terms that I can keep this sustainable from a financial standpoint. And so hearing that and hearing it other places in the market, but put so well by her, we relatively quickly like, okay, we got to get out of fee for service.
Yeah.
Now, who wins if patients have fewer visits? And at the time, it was these physical therapy groups that had direct contracts with employers, because typically they got a lump sum to manage the population. And so if they could have fewer visits, and you could achieve that in a couple different ways, if they had fewer visits, that means they could treat the population with fewer people and therefore be able to drive a higher margin for their business. So that's who we served, was physical therapy groups and athletic training groups that typically had some sort of on-site presence and a more value-based contract.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking as you were describing this. It feels very much how we would talk about value-based care more broadly in the health system. So when you got your start, you not easy. And in fact, I think you actually had a day job. So you're having to balance both of these, if you will. And the SaRA Health as a business was not necessarily operating a level that could sustain you or sustain your other co-founders without per se that day job. So you had to do both. You had to find time in the day, and right, that had sacrifices that you had to make. But the business model, right, to your point, you had to get out of fee for service. You had to optimize around these value-based engagements. Um, as you look back on those days and you think about where SaRA Health is today, what are some of the learnings that you took away that either in terms of the technology or how you deliver your service that separates you today that maybe perhaps had you not been in that environment would have been harder to figure out those differentiations within your platform?
So I'll take one from the call it like patient provider
Yeah.
experience and one from the business model. So from a business model and go to market, we learned how sticky you are when you're seen as a cost of goods sold or attached to revenue. And so that's where now
Yeah.
our business model is. It looks like a cost of goods sold, right? Like we only get paid if the practice gets paid. So therefore, it's like, oh well, I'm just taking new money that I've gotten goes to SaRA that they facilitated. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's totally fair versus your more typical, 3-year, per provider per month, per clinic location per month type of model. We've been very against that, like completely adversarial to it, because I want us attached to revenue
Yeah.
at every point in the journey. And that creates a more aligned incentive structure between you and your customers so that you're trying to solve for the same problems, right? So that was one key piece where we learned that, got a little bit lucky to have gotten that in the early days and now have that as ingrained into our business model DNA,
Okay.
as we have moved forward. So that, and then on the patient engagement side, we originally thought we were going to do home exercise programs better. Like that's what we thought
Yeah.
we were going to do better. And what we found was even in a highly engaged population, like we had a lot of firefighters, and that is an extremely high dedication, high adherence, high propensity and muscle memory of like logging
Yeah.
things. And
Interesting.
even then, it was difficult for them to get them on the app every day. They're like, look, I don't need to. I'm not doing this every day. Or, hey, I've got it. Like, I've seen my exercises for a couple days. Like, I've got this. I don't need this. And so we started asking questions like, okay, well, what's lacking, and getting down into that. And I still remember Danielle from Plainfield Fire. She had recorded a testimonial for us, like really great story. But she's like, look, like sometimes I just need a reminder. And like that hit. It's like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, what if we texted you? And she's like, well, it better be a good text. And and that's what started us down this process of realizing like, oh, it's not necessarily the most valuable data to say that you did 5 sets of 3 or 5 sets of 4. It's the fact that you're still struggling with stairs. It's the fact that, or if you get outside, like into our vertigo patients, right? It's the fact that you did have a dizzy spell over the weekend, right? Like those are the data points that are extremely valuable. Or like, hey, you were in a lot of pain on that flight. Like that is extremely, that helps me dial in my treatment because now I know that it's when you're sitting that causes the most pain, right? Where if you're trying to just remember it, it gets really, really difficult. And so that started us down a pathway where we changed our patient level and provider level experience, but also the business model. At least the DNA of that never really changed. It's
Right.
just how we were able to keep ourselves attached to revenue.
So, as I listen to you tell that story, one of the things that just gets me super excited is how impactful the client, their perspective and feedback is. And I feel like you can say that people say, hey, we're client focused, but really the rubber meets the road in terms of, do you actually put things in the product that you heard them say that now they respond to? And as you said, it was a light bulb moment, but that's a little bit of a pivot. I mean, you were building out an approach, capabilities, and then you heard a trusted client say, well, but what about this? And then you switched, and you probably saw a demonstrable impact in terms of adoption rate and engagement within your patient population.
Yeah, it was it was almost overnight. And it was like,
Wow.
whoa, like this is something here. And now we got a lot more to build as a
Yeah.
result, but oh, holy cow. Like I think we have a little bit of lightning in a bottle. And they just kept growing with it. And then when the reimbursement sees change in a very positive way for us, it allowed us to grow even faster.
So we've referenced reimbursement changes. So once again, just to go back for our audience, in 2018, you've exited business school, you've started SaRA Health. It is the on course, but not quite the juggernaut that is today. It's got a journey to go on. Um, when when you say reimbursement changes, so just guide our audience, what do you mean by that? So CMS issued codes that allowed PT and occupational health and other providers to bill against. When did that happen, and what exactly were those? Not the numerical codes, but what were the codes for, if you will?
Yeah. So if we take a little bit of a step back to take a lot of steps forward quicker, right? You started seeing CMS come out with call them broadly remote care codes.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
a lot of people have heard of remote physiological monitoring or RPM, right? The blood pressure cuffs, continuous glucose monitors, those types of data facilitating devices that CMS saw a ton of savings from.
Okay.
I think like in 1 year, they estimated just in COPD patients, they saved $9 billion on reduction in hospitalizations.
Wow. We're going to put that number up, $9 billion savings.
Billion.
Yeah.
Billion with a B,
Billion.
right?
Yeah.
And so they saw that, and then they came out with chronic care management, principal care management, these other care coordination codes. And then in 2022, they came out with remote therapeutic monitoring. So sounds very similar to remote physiological monitoring, and it should, because they're almost like children codes, if you will. So instead of it having to be a hardware device, it could be software as a medical device. So SaRA Health is a software as a medical device. We have a letter from the FDA, all that fun stuff. And it could also be not just an MD or advanced practice provider like an NP or a PA, but could also be any allied health professional. So physical therapist, occupational therapist, and a slew of other clinicians. And so CMS saw so much value from RPM that they decided to expand it to RTM. And RTM is getting expanded almost annually at this point.
Wow.
So in 2022, when it came out, it was just musculoskeletal system and respiratory system. They added cognitive behavioral therapy a year later. And now in 2026, it's not finalized yet, but we're expecting to see there be 2 new codes that give basically reimbursement, 2 new codes for lower levels of engagement because they're seeing so much value from it. And like our data shows, like this is just such a smart investment. When we run 2 different analyses. In one, we found that patients on SaRA typically had a 20% better functional outcome, and they did it in 2.3 fewer visits than would have been expected.
And why is that? I mean, not to sidetrack you, but why are patients getting better outcomes because SaRA is in place?
2 reasons, I believe, 2 main reasons. One is based on our patient self-reported data. So, of course, deal with a grain of salt, is that patients on average are 63% adherent to their home program as a result of being on SaRA, where the average outside of it is probably closer to like 20 to 27%.
Wow.
So you're getting
like
more
3x. Yeah.
Right. Big deal. And then this is a little bit more of me making a guesstimate, right? But with those data points, providers are able to have more effective visits. So they're able to use that time with their patients more effectively and get ahead of any sort of adverse type of event. And I'll use one example, and I'll keep it short. But a patient, the question was, were you able to perform your exercise today? Yes or no? Patient said, no, I'm on vacation and don't have my equipment with me, so I can't do my exercises. It was fully planning on basically not doing anything for a week while they were out.
Yeah.
PT gets that, responds back through SaRA, hey, could you do these 3 exercises? You don't need any equipment. And patient does all of them for the entire week. So instead of regressing for a week, they actually made progress. And while that's maybe somewhat theatrical or a bit of a bigger than normal example,
I suspect it's more common than not. Yeah. So the impact SaRA has is increased engagement, increased awareness, and I really liked how you talked about almost changing the care discussion from reactive, meaning I'm reacting to what you've suddenly told me, to I'm now being proactive as a trusted clinical provider to giving you direction for how you can care better for yourself.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agency.
Yeah,
We
I
hear
love
we hear
that.
that a lot.
Yeah,
Agency definitely in our physical therapy clients, but especially in our pain management clients.
yeah,
We hear that a lot. We have documented examples of basically avoided hospitalizations for all sorts of different reasons, especially that's a very complex patient population. And I mean, there's all sorts of health literacy and like other pieces that we're not even scratching the surface on the amount of good I think that we can help our clients do for their patients. But that's like agency is a big piece of it. Like, hey, you can do this. You can
wow.
affect this. This is in your power. And then, yeah, like I don't know
Uh,
if United or Cigna has model or CMS has modeled that out yet, but like, what does a patient who like what is how can you calculate the benefit of more agency against lower cost? I'd imagine it's a pretty steep and
yeah.
awesome curve to look at.
So for any of our academics out there, I think Steven just gave you a great study that not only could you go do but get published and have a lot of interest in. And that, man, that just really that strikes a chord with me. This concept of agency. Yeah, I'm more so focused in my professional life in the primary care space, and that is such a big conversation that we're hearing in that space, which is one, I feel reactive. This is the primary care doc. And then two, on the patient side, they don't feel like I don't, as a patient, I don't feel like I have a lot of agency. I get a reminder. I'm supposed to go show up, I think, but I don't really know what's going on other than maybe if I need something, I'm going to try to get into the doctor. What was the impact for your business when these CPT codes came out?
I mean, we pivoted the entire company, so we technically had zero customers in in March of 2022 when we decided to make the pivot.
Yeah.
Now we're sitting over 200. I think we're serving somewhere around 1,000 different clinics, tens of thousands of patients at any given point in time.
What a growth story.
And so it's been, yeah, it took a little bit to build that up. You know, healthcare is
Yeah.
definitely an industry where trust is required and it has to fit in the workflow really, really well. We definitely didn't have it figured out on day one. We still don't have it perfectly figured out. But yeah, we're starting to now see the benefit of investment and doing it the right way from the get go, and starting to see the whole thing start to go up and up and to the right.
So CEO and founder, uh, as when you talk about the experience that you had in undergrad, and then especially as you went and got your MBA, and you very much had a natural, it feels like to me anyway, a natural bent toward entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily mean sales or go to market. Talk a little bit for our audience, because a good chunk of our audience are growth leaders, they are salespeople, etc. Um, as a founder, how did you think about sales? Were you the person picking up the phone? Did you have somebody else doing it? What was that dynamic like for you in the business?
So yeah, I cold called for the what first 2 years, and we had some customers like in the early days, and then was able to be more customer success while we kept the business more left on light support
Yeah.
until we could hit this other pivot. And then after that, yeah, I was cold calling clinics, going and doing that where I leaned into my strengths. So my strengths were not in SEO or marketing or ads or any of that. I didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
What I did have was a lot of experience working with clients, especially larger ones, and building those relationships. And so we just put ourselves in ability to succeed. So instead of doing $5,000 a month in Facebook ads, we went to $5,000 a month worth of conferences. It is
Mm.
conference. We get in front of people, tell them the story, listen, hear, and then iterate really, really, really quickly. And so that worked for me. That worked for us. Would it work for somebody else? That's really your strength. So
Yeah.
I played with my strengths, and then surrounded myself with people who had the clinical and operational, which are two very separate things, two very, very separate things, the clinical and operational
Mm-hmm.
experience to help hone in the message. for our customers.
And I imagine in those early days, as you were making cold calls, going to these conferences, there's probably a lot of no's, or,
Oh yeah.
hey, trying to, there's bigger companies or other companies that may do something similar, and you're trying to wedge your way in. I mean, what inside you helped propel, if you will, past all those no's? Did you have to get yourself up every morning, take an extra shot of caffeine, do a clean jerk? Now, I'm playing on the Olympic piece here for a moment, but I mean, how did you gird yourself to deal with that type of mindset to go out and get the business that you did?
I think it was helpful in that through a different series of events, like I basically burnt the boats. Like this had to work.
Yeah.
This had to work. There was no option for
Uh,
it not to work. And so that was it. I don't necessarily suggest that to everybody,
yeah.
but that was the path that worked for us. Was like, this just has to work. We have to figure it out. And just going from there, and then testing, learning, and going and figuring out what works. And I learned something pretty early on at Deloitte. We call it the asshole rule, or at least that's what our internal group called it. So you could be a really big asshole over email, less so over a call, less so over a video call, and even less so in person. And so as
Okay.
a result, I was like, okay, well, if that's the case, and if a lot of the practice owners that we want to talk to are still treating, then I just need to go drop into their clinics. And so there was we had hired Tom, our head of sales and growth by this point, but we made a strategic choice to go after one specific franchise. So Physical, FYZICAL,
Yeah.
we're now their strategic partner for RTM. And we got a couple that had a couple of their clinics on, and then we made a goal of going and visiting 100 clinics in a quarter.
Wow. I love that.
Physically dropping
Yeah.
into 100 clinics.
And you would walk in, like walk in. You're not calling it, but hey, I'm going to get a meeting. You just walk in.
Just walked in. We had the whole thing scheduled. Like, he had Michigan, and like he had 8 states he was hitting. I had 8 states I was hitting. Pick the biggest cities where we could go in, be there for 24 hours, and hit basically all of them. And then doing the quick recon of like, okay. And luckily for Physical, you can kind of tell you can tell who the owner is pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so just walk in. Hey, we work with a few other Physical clinics. And is Jerry in today? I see he's typically at this clinic. Would like to show how we're helping Physicals drive more revenue and better patient engagement, if that's interesting to you. And it was so disarming to the front desk. They're like, oh, you work with others and you already know who you're asking for, right? That typically we could at least get a conversation that day. Or worst case, like, hey, I'm still treating. Can you call me tomorrow? Like, got you. Yeah, absolutely. Here's just a little leave behind. Talking more about what we do. But yeah, we just brute force. That was it.
So I'm gonna do a flashback for our audience. One of the guests that we had last season, his name's Juan Corona. He's now the head of sales for this fantastic company called TrackMy. Really great success digital health story here in Kansas City. But he grew up in sales at Cerner Corporation, and when we interviewed him, Steven, he had a very similar story where, as a newly minted salesperson, he had the Northeast, and he said, I didn't know any better. I just thought I showed up. And so he'd literally just get on a plane, go to a city, and start dropping into hospitals and just walk in. Hey, I'm here to see, and he'd go to the CEO, the administrator's office. I'm here to see the CEO. Here's what I'm here to talk about. He said there was one, I'm going to butcher the story, but he got kicked out of a hospital 3 times, and then they barred him from the premises. So he went in the morning, security guard escorted him out. He went back at lunch, got escorted out, went back again, finally said, oh, you're done. Don't come back. We're putting your picture up. But I mean, there's a grit, right? There's a determination. I forgot you used the phrase burn the boats, but what I hear is commitment. You were committed, locked in, if you will, that made that possible to go deal with, because I'm sure not every conversation was a yes. Not everyone said, hey, we're happy to see you. I'm glad you walked in to tell me this great story.
Oh yeah. Although, again, typically people were at least a little bit nicer when you were in person.
Yeah.
Right. Like that was it. Also learned a little fun hack that if you are cold calling, especially to like anyone at the front desk, a way to make sure that they actually wrote down your information is to say at the very end, "Oh, you know what? I think I might have given you the wrong phone number. Can you read that back to me?" And if they
Ah,
can't, then they didn't read. They didn't write it down. You just now you know that's data. Like okay,
okay.
and maybe they'll write it down this time. After now that everyone's a little embarrassed, it's awkward, which is fine, right? It's memorable,
Yeah.
and you just move from there.
That's a great hack. I can already tell you, Steven, that's going to be a little clip that I pull out of this segment. That's going to be fantastic. So, all right, fast forward, 2025, on an incredible growth story. Lots of things are going right. One of the things that certainly is dominating the conversation writ large across healthcare, across the markets period, is artificial intelligence. Um, as you talked about both the purpose and the capabilities of SaRA, once again, for our audience, a lot of this is focused on how providers can communicate, connect with, and manage their relationship with patients much more effectively. Where does AI play a role for SaRA? What does it mean for you as a business?
So, we have places that we use AI,
Yeah.
we will use AI, and that we will never use
Okay.
AI.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Tell
that's
me
how I
more.
think of those buckets. So our we use AI to help generate more specific questions to patients,
Okay.
right? But
Oh,
our questions, we're never getting anything assertive, any sort of plan of care change. So there's where it's not ever used, right? But helps give a more specific question to be able to deliver more valuable data back to the provider. And so we have that. We also, it has the ability to then help generate potential responses for the provider to send.
mm,
So there's a really good paper on how patients preferred the AI generated message versus the clinician created message. I think a lot of that is just simply the link
yeah.
that AI would create. And so part of that is helping providers realize that piece and helping auto generate that. As well as sentiment analysis at more of a practice level, even at the patient provider level too, to be able to know if someone's off track, on track from a patient perspective, so provider to patient, but also from a provider, providers to patients at a practice
Mm,
leader levels. Like, hey, are there providers that aren't engaging with this at all? Is that something they need to go after? Are they getting really poor engagement and that's being known? So helping with that and all that AI and all those features we are pooling together under our, IBM has Watson, SaRA has Morris. So it's our dedication to
ah,
my grandpa, we're calling it Morris,
that's
which the team
great.
was a little bit like, people are going to be confused. Like, I really don't care.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. And so those are some different ways that we're using AI and SaRA and the patient and provider and practice, leader facing. Of course, we're using it internally for a lot of things like our developer tools, as well as data analysis on
Mm,
our end. And then probably more areas that I know that our team is very AI, friendly when it comes to that. But then there's places we're just never going to use it.
okay.
And one of those is creating anything assertive to the patient, right? Like
Okay.
our AI is never going to generate hey, we think you should do 2 sets of 5 instead, or hey, we think you should schedule an appointment. Like that's never going to be something that we do. We don't feel it's right for us to do that, and it would violate a lot of trust between us and our customers. Additionally, our provider-facing customer service has no AI in it.
Okay.
Zero.
Yeah. So when someone has a question or they call you, that's all people at SaRA Health that is
Yep.
responding, your clients, etc. Interest. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
all people. It's
Because
all
you
people.
want to keep that human to human touch. Like when
Exactly.
people are going to call when there's a problem because there's a problem, they're not in a great headspace. And yeah, having that, I wrote about earlier this concept of unexpected empathy, really around, where does the line stop? Or I, I don't, I don't want to say that I know where the line should stop. I was more so kind of voicing that, um, human to human connection, there's these moments of empathy that you don't always expect. And I imagine in a customer service call, you want to maintain that. Like the
Yes.
surprises that help turn the conversation can only really be found, at least today, in that human to human discussion.
It's fantastic if anyone ever says representative or something like that in
Yeah.
the chat. And our lead right now is James, so he's relatively knew he was doing a great job. He's a physical therapist, and like represented like, hey, this is me. Like,
Yeah. I am the
yeah,
representative.
yeah. What do you want to know? I have 9 cats. Like he does, and so that I
That's
guess.
awesome.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
AI would make that up, but yeah, it's really cool to be able to give those nice surprises. Like, no, there's no AI here. We're just trying to help you the best we can, because you're incredibly busy. The likelihood that you're reaching out with anything you can't solve yourself is incredibly low.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's a couple places we don't use it. And then, I guess, we were talking about this beforehand, but also personally, a lot of us use AI on a personal level, right? So whether
Mhm.
that's some that use it for workout tracking apps or running apps and different ways you can do that. And then we talked about, I've trained my own little chat GPT model based off some of the, call it, influencers, if you will, that I really appreciate, like Dr. Mike Israetel, my weightlifting coach Will Fleming, Dr. Andrew Huberman, Dr. Casey Beans, and Dr. Mark Hyman, and I'll have them debate certain adjustments to a routine, right, or a different
Yeah.
product I'm thinking of trying. So, for example, there's this really cool new piece of hardware tech called Firefly, and it's really really cool.
Yeah.
It's supposed to help reduce soreness and be able to get you back to training quicker the next day. The problem is, for me, is that because it reduces inflammation, there's a likelihood it would also inhibit my ability to gain strength. So, like,
Really?
but that was going through that, like, hey, what are the pros and cons of using this? Like, hey, here's a potential issue here. For the same reason why you don't want to take ibuprofen or any sort of anti-inflammatory post workout is the same reason why this product may not be very beneficial to you. So off days, fantastic, right?
Yeah.
You've already
Yeah.
kind of banked any gains that you're going to have, but as a post training modality is a really terrible idea.
So Steven, one, I love the fact that you built a custom chat GPT model with your preferred experts to debate back and forth around what is the best course of action that you can go do for your own training, for your own exercise regimen. I'm gonna make an ask. You don't have to say yes because you may not want to sign up for this, but I think we should do a separate pod of how did you do that? For all the inquiring minds out there, how would I go do that? How would I go create? But I think
You don't
that's
need to
just
sort of pod. It's so easy, right? It's
really,
just like,
really,
hey, I want you to respond to me in this way. I want them
yeah.
to always debate. Here's who I
So
really
you have a defined
respect.
prompt that you put
Yep,
in, and then you have your question. That's
yep.
great. That's awesome. Um, Man, just fantastic. As you spend time with clients, because I imagine, 7 now, what 8 years into SaRA Health, you've got growth. The company's growing, the business is growing. I imagine you still have a pretty significant client-facing role. Is that fair? Um,
Yes.
uh, when you talk to them today around, the 3 columns in terms of what AI will do, what it won't do, et cetera, what do your clients say back? Meaning, you know, is it even on their radar, or is it just this thing, this ambiguous thing, but they don't know how to think about it? I'm curious how your clients think about what it should or should not be for them as a care provider.
I think generally speaking, our practice leaders are, and now granted, we might have we do have a biased sample set, right? Because they're using us, so they're already showing a proclivity to invest in technology,
Yeah,
right? So
that's fair. Yeah.
that with that as a grain of salt, um, our view of it, and I think this is replicated by a lot of our customers, is that AI should be used to ruthlessly root out all administrative burden for providers.
Mm. And I love that phrase, ruthlessly root out. That's not a tongue twister. That's not just a catchphrase. That's a mission statement. Ruthlessly root out. I love that.
And
Yeah.
so how can we use AI to be able to do that within our product, but then also even talking with our customers, and that's how a lot of them are thinking about it. So where we see the most uptick today, I'd say, are lead generation. And
Mm.
so in different marketing and using chatbots to help patients be able to schedule a visit without having to talk to somebody, because everyone kind of makes the tongue-in-cheek joke of like, no one likes to be on the phone anymore. Well, instead of being like, okay, well, darn it, I give up. It's like, okay, well, with that being the case, like, how can we be able to play in this new world? And so seeing that on the lead gen side, on more of the clinical, I think we're seeing a lot of excitement around the AI scribe, which makes a ton of sense
Right.
to use. My wife is a nurse practitioner, and so like we're probably going to pay for one for her out of pocket. Like just like,
Yeah.
hey, this is going to save you so much time. It doesn't make any sense not to do this. And then on the billing side as well, which to me just makes sense. So I think you can look at it um, from a let's get the administrative burden out, right? The things that don't add clinical value. Then also look at who is using it that you're connected with, right? So if your patients are going to Dr. ChatGPT, you should be using it in some way, shape, or form just so you can better connect with them when they come in. And if payers are using AI to deny claims, you should probably be using AI to either generate claims and or generate the letters to be able to attack denials. And so that's kind of our general mindset around it and what we see a lot of our customers, how they think about it too.
I think that's such a really good, just spot on, probably synopsis of what providers, how they're internalizing these things. And, as you say, this is what you're hearing firsthand. I also think about it in the construct, uh, per se, that, there's an opportunity for the provider, regardless what type of clinician, to create more of an abundance environment. And what I mean by that, I kind of go back to what you said, the example you gave earlier in terms of both proactive versus reactive care and giving more information to the provider. The way I'm starting to frame this in my own mind is, how do we enable the provider to have more time, not less, with the person?
Yep.
How do we enable them to care for more people, not less, but see less people, not more, because the ones they're seeing are the ones they need to see. There is a need, a reason. Not to say that every patient doesn't have a reason to be seen, but um, you're enabling different levels of engagement, and you're bringing more information, but condensing it down to the provider, so that when they do see the patient, they spend more quality time. They have more information to meet you where you are versus you. You used the phrase earlier. I had not heard this before, but white coat syndrome, kind of, which I took. You kind of freeze up. You're trying, what are all the things I should say, when probably the day before you're going through the litany in your mind. It's like, I need to talk about this or this or this, and then like it goes out of your mind. And so how do we create that environment of abundance? And it feels like these tools, used properly, can go do that, if you will.
Couldn't agree more. There's I would consider somewhere between friend and mentor, probably more mentor than, depending on the day. He was one of the co-founders and chief clinical officer of a group called Reflection Health, which used the Xbox Connect to be able to do the first set of vision, computer vision and tracking movement and angles and all that. And when he was part of the group that helped develop the remote therapeutic monitoring codes. And his quote that I always give him credit for, is a Nung Choksi, is, this should give providers more time to care.
Yeah, time to care. I love that.
That is just, I think that's the essence of it, right? That's exactly what you're talking about. It's definitely what I'm talking about. Like, giving them more time to care is really the goal. And if you're anywhere close to that and you're facilitating that, it's going to work.
Yeah. And I do believe, though, back to your earlier statement, that if you as a business, as the leader, and then as you sit with your teams, don't have this relentless, ruthless focus on removing administrative waste, then it's hard to jump to the front of, how do I provide more time for care?
Yep.
I mean, it's just, those two things have to go together in my mind. So clearly a lot of change has happened within this space. Your company, the platform, is accelerating. You're providing a ton of value and growing. Where do you see, I'm going to just kind of use this term writ large, remote care. Where do you see this space going for you and for the industry over the next 12 to 24 months?
So I'll use some of the things I found at the market analysis level. So right now, forget the exact source, but believe this remote care market in the U.S. is about 24.9 billion and should grow to 46 billion by 2030.
Woo. That's,
so you're talking
with a billion, 24 billion, 49 billion. Those are big numbers.
big
Yeah.
numbers, right? Big
It's
numbers.
a great TAM.
Is very, very good TAM, very good TAM, and you're seeing some exits too, which is nice
Mm.
for us, and I think others in the remote care space where you have Memora just got by Athelis, PT Wire just got by Prompt. You can look at like a CarePort, right, which was all care coordination. I think and in that vein, pre some of these new codes coming out when they sold to WellSky for I think 1.3 billion. So yeah, like big numbers and nice multiples too on that from more like the business and making sure our investors are able to get a solid return on investment from betting on us. But I think it's gonna. I don't see how it can't grow, and for a couple of reasons. One, I mean they're adding codes next year. Like they added the APCM, which I forget exactly what that. I should know what that means, but it's for primary care.
Yeah,
And
advanced primary care management,
yeah,
and
that's it. Advanced
just
primary
yeah
care. I can't remember the A.
for our audience. I'm a big fan of that particular program, which is actually being underutilized in my opinion, but it's very similar to chronic care management, CCM or TCM codes, with the exception of it's not time based, much
Yep.
more population health focused. And it's a very simple 3 segmentation of your Medicare eligible population. So we'll put the definition up in the. But yes, great shout out. That's one of my favorite programs that's out there right now. That broadly within this space, obviously, remote care is a really good thing to be focused on.
So
Yeah,
you're seeing this, right? It's
yeah,
continuing to get more and more funding at the payer level, at the investor level. I think seeing like Hinge, Omada, and likely Sword.
yeah,
Sword hasn't put out their S1 yet, but I think that's probably coming. And so like you're seeing all these dots on the scatter plot of success that are all leading in a really positive direction. And so I think it's got to go there. And then if you look at Dr. Oz's testimony, right? A couple of his quotes I think really ring out true. One is that he believes providers are going to treat twice as many patients over the course of the next 10 years, right? And so, like, if that's the case, then we have to provide patients with tools to be able to give them agency, or else we're just simply not going to be able to handle the cost. Like, we don't even handle it now, really. Like, you have
yeah,
stories like my grandfather today. And so, like, that's going to get worse. Then you're looking at this massive cost iceberg as the population ages. That's going to be really nasty unless we get ahead of it by providing more remote care and incentivizing the innovation both at the technology and at the provider level to be able to take some risk and figure some things out and learn. And then I think that you're seeing some more requests for information come out from CMS around like how are some of these things working. You're seeing new acts get introduced, like the Rural Patient Monitoring Act that Marsha Blackburn and Warner, I think Dean Warner, co-sponsored, which is going after the fact that right now a provider in Birmingham, Alabama, so one of our customers, is getting paid around 40% less for the codes we facilitate, 30 to 40% less than a group in New York City. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't expect my Hulu subscription to be cheaper in Kansas City than New York City than in Southeast Missouri, right? It's not how technology works. So you're just asking these provider groups to take a lower margin because the tech cost is going to be the same. They just get hit with a lower margin. Like the cost of living isn't that much. Like you can't make it all work. And so this Rural Patient Monitoring Act is there to establish a floor at the national MAC average, which I think is brilliant in its focus and its goal. And we already know it's going to pay for itself. Now I'm sure they're going to need some help to be able to have the CBO agree with that. But that's I'm seeing more and more of that. Is giving me a lot of optimism for the future.
We'll drop the link. I've got some research to do. We'll drop the link to the rural health legislation that Steven was referring to. I encourage you to go take a look at it. It'll be interesting to track. I think that would be a welcome development among other things. And I share kind of your view of directionally where this is going. I mean, the system, resources in the system today don't match reality in terms of what's needed to deliver care, much less what's projected to need to deliver care in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, et cetera. So I think there's a lot of good ideas I think we're going to continue to see a lot of innovation. In that same vein, Steven, 12 months from now, what are you going to jerk and herc? What are you going to clean jerk? I didn't even get the terminology right. What's your projection on how much you're going to do in your Olympic weightlifting competition? Give us a number. How can we hold you accountable?
The number is 240.
240.
So I have a little whiteboard in my garage gym where I work out 95% of the time.
Yeah.
And it says 240 on it. That's it. It says 240. Then it has the different percentages, say 95% of that, what that is. So 240 would probably be for me like somewhere between 105 to 110 kilo snatch. So that's, I don't know, snatch is all the way
up.
Yeah,
okay.
One movement.
One movement.
Four, all the way.
Okay.
And up.
Look at us doing that. That's great.
Yeah. Getting button ups. No,
yeah, that's right. Don't judge my form. I'm very much an amateur. All right.
So yeah, 105, 110, and then somewhere between 135, 130, 135, clean and jerk. So about 290 to 300 pounds.
For those who don't know, clean and jerk is this.
So you clean to the chest. So it gives the chest in one movement, and then jerk is overhead from there.
So the big difference between the two, the first one is one movement. The second one is overhead. Two movements. Gotcha.
Yep.
All right. Yep. Fantastic. Yeah, I watched, I'm a cyclist. So I'm not a weightlifter, I'm a cyclist. So I try to get lean and mean, not big and mean. But I watched this wonderful video on one of the cycling groups that I follow, where they took a person who had never cycled before, and over 6 months went from zero to doing a century ride with professional riders. And they said, and then, the thesis was, how close can we get them to professional? He didn't get close at all, but he still did it. He still did the century ride. It was an amazing ride. And so as I listen to you talk, the question I'm asking myself is, if we did a reality show, Steven, could in 6 months, could I go from zero, because that's where I'm at, to 240? Could I match you? I don't think I could. I don't think, but that would be fast. I think our viewers would watch. They would watch that for several reasons.
I think there's probably two questions I would ask.
Yeah.
Which is, one, what is your max back squat today?
Yeah.
And then would want to watch you sit into a squat.
Oh,
like those would be the two things I would probably. Now, I'm not a coach. I have a coach.
Yeah.
There's a good reason for that. But yeah, I think the prerequisite strength that you need is to be squatting well into the 400s to be able to do that.
I can tell you I'm not doing that. I'm not.
And then it's and then it's based, a lot of it would be on how much mobility you have or don't have, and how much you're gonna have to develop that over the course of X amount of time.
So we're just gonna have to leave our audience with bated breath. They may never know the answer to this. What could I accomplish in 6 months? Who knows? But what I do know is that Steven and the SaRA Health team is building something special. And you've got a bright future ahead of us, or ahead of you rather, or ahead of all of us. And I applaud the focus on that tight connection between provider and patient, and continuing to increase the frequency of how those patients connect, how they talk, how they give information. It's just such a wonderful mission. As we close out, Steven, any words of advice for people who are sitting in undergrad, maybe going to MBA, maybe not, they're thinking about building the business, whether it's healthcare or otherwise, as you look back on the journey, by no means done, but the journey you've been on, what would you tell someone that is starting at the very beginning that you wish you would have heard on day one yourself?
Find a mentor to have been there and just ask. And you might as well start getting used to some numbers and denial at that point too, right? Some no's. And so just build yourself a little pipeline, right? Like, hey, I think to be able to have, like, work from the end goal back, right? So if I want to have 2 mentors, I probably need to have 10 conversations. To have 10 conversations, I probably need to have 50.
That's a sales funnel.
Like, build that funnel.
That's right. You're building a sales funnel. There you go.
That's exactly it, right?
I love it.
But like everything. So when I do talk to undergrad or grad classes, that's, that is my, like, one piece of advice that every single time, like, and with having a mentor too that you can check in with. Hey, I've made this much progress. What do you think? Like, where should I go to next? And have it be someone that's, in the industry. They've got to be in healthcare, or else it's just, they're not going to understand it. They don't necessarily need to be a tech guru, right? I think, using the ATI co-founder, Matt Kruger, I don't think he would say he is, an AI mastermind by any stretch, but he knows the business of PT extremely well. He knows what the clinician mindset is. He knows what it's like in the board meetings. He knows that process. And so you can have that, have that there. And if you can build out, we talked about the 4 different corners of the, more of the customer facing, right? Your patient, provider, practice, and payer. Do that. I don't think you need the business model canvas. Like, build that, and then try to build your team in a similar 4 quadrant. But it's business, clinical, tech, and operations. I think that last one is one we didn't put enough credence to early on, and it was a huge, huge miss. And it's little shifts in language that can dramatically change conversations. For example, we used to say, pre-Amanda coming on as our COO, we used to say, $50 to $60 per episode in increased revenue. And some got it, but the vast majority didn't. She gets in, she's like doing some quick math. It's so fun to watch. Like, she's just brilliant. And it's so fun to watch her do it. She's like, guys, it's $5 in revenue per visit, $5 RPD. Like, stop saying this other stuff. And I mean, it was instant.
Wow.
Instant. Because every other practice leader is doing that math. Like, okay, if you take me from $65 to $70, most of that's going to flow to my bottom line. I already know everything else. Like, I need that number. That number has to be presented to me in that way. And we wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for operational experience.
That's fantastic. What great advice. Great advice for our audience, for our listeners. Steven, this has been a phenomenal episode. I can't express enough gratitude for you taking the time. You're building, you've got a company, and yet you're spending it with us, with our audience. So thank you for that. This has been great. Appreciate it. I wish you and SaRA Health the best. This is, y'all got a bright future ahead of you.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. I sure hope so. We're going to continue to work hard to make sure that does happen, God willing. And he's put us on a great path. And I feel very, very, just very grateful to be in this position. And I'm thankful that you chose to spend your limited time and resources to be able to have a conversation with me. And I hope that you and your listeners were able to get something valuable out of this conversation. So thank you for having me on and having lunch with me. And, I think the future is bright in health tech broadly. And so I hope to hopefully be one of those rays of the bigger piece of sunshine.
Without a doubt. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Steven.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you for listening to The Counterweight. We are excited to bring new episodes out each week. We are incredibly grateful to our guests and our listeners. Let us know what you think by commenting on the episodes. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Subscribe, like, and follow. And we look forward to joining you again next week for another episode of The Counterweight.